A very good evening to all our viewers. On behalf of the Committee on Public and Government Financial Management and the Center of Excellence Directorate, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to all our viewers today on today's webinar on reimagining India's public finances, state capacity, fiscal federalism, and the expanding landscape of professional opportunities. So today we are doing this webinar on a very important topic, and it is a matter of great honor and pleasure that we have today with us Dr. Shamika Ravi. Ma'am, thank you so much for joining today's webinar. Ma'am is a member of the Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister and Secretary to the Government of India. And we also would like to welcome Dr. Nipur Pavan Mang, Director. Ma'am is a Director and Dean, Center of Excellence, Hyderabad. Thank you so much, ma'am, that you are here. And we also have with us Dr. Sen Gupta. He is a Deputy Secretary in the Board of Trustees. And thank you so much that for the Committee on Public Finance and the Center of Excellence Directorate that we are jointly doing this seminar. Just I'd like to brief about the Committee on Public and Government Financial Management. So as a partner in national building, through this committee, we've been engaged in improving the accounting and financial management systems in the government. For this, we've been giving various technical inputs and we do various capacity building programs. And we do our best so that there are reforms in the local bodies. And this is just broadly because of the committee. And since we have an expert who is so much in the subject and all of us are eager to hear ma'am, I'll just request Sen Gupta sir to please take this webinar forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening to all of you. Good evening to each and every one. And ma'am, thank you very much for welcoming all our guests in today's webinar. Anupur ma'am, thank you very much. And Shamika ma'am, a special welcome. You are one of the very esteemed member of the panel. And today, very important speaker. And the topic is also very important, particularly in today's economic scenario. And we are really eagerly waiting for your address, your special address, in fact. And all the members who have joined in this particular webinar, I hope that we'll be able to gain a lot of insights from the address of Shamika ma'am, Dr. Shamika Ravi. And Nupur ma'am also is with us, who herself is the Director cum Dean in our COE Hyderabad, and one of the expert in family business and one of the very renowned researcher, not only in India, I think, or international. So welcome, ma'am. And I will request Nupur ma'am to speak a few things, and then probably you can hand over to Shamika ma'am.
So what I'm going to do is first, brief a little bit more about Shamika, because beyond the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, I think she has a very stellar track record. So she was also the Director of Research at Brookings India and a Vice President Economic Policy at Observer Research Foundation and Non-Resident Senior Fellow of Governance Studies Program at Brookings Institution. Her research has focused on economics of development, including areas of finance, healthcare, urbanization, gender equality, welfare, and poverty. Shamika is an extremely popular teacher, award-winning teacher at the Indian School of Business. She also teaches at BITS School of Management, and the subjects that she generally teaches are managerial economics, game theory, and microfinance. She's published extensively in international peer-reviewed journals and writes regularly for the popular newspapers and media. She holds a PhD in economics from New York University, Masters in economics from Delhi School of Economics, and BA honors in economics from Lady Shri Ram College for Women. Currently, she lives in Delhi, and by the way, her husband is also a very noted statistician and economist. So welcome, Shamika, and thank you so much for agreeing to do this in the first place. I would not act like I'm an expert in the topic you're going to speak on. So nothing on the topic. We would prefer to hear from you directly. We have hundreds, right? Seema ji, hundreds of people as who have joined us on Zoom.
Yes, ma'am. 300 plus have joined, and people also are watching on the YouTube, ma'am. So, because this is directly also being relayed on the YouTube. So, but here also 300 plus have logged in, ma'am.
You have a huge group of
Yes, ma'am.
large group of people waiting to hear from you.
Yes, ma'am.
So we'll
Yes,
not
ma'am.
keep you from speaking. Please go ahead, Shamika.
Thank you, Nupur. Thank you, everyone, ICI, for putting this platform together. It's very rarely that I get to address people virtually now, unfortunately. But in fact, I had to reinstall Zoom, and there was a time when we used to live on Zoom. So obviously, it's a far cry from the time of the pandemic. What I'm going to present to you today is basically some recent research, but these are longer time trends. So I think the general appreciation will come from, hopefully, can everyone see?
Yes, Shamika.
Great. So, we are going to talk a little bit about the situation of state budgets. What is the fiscal situation in the country today? Largely on account of the fact that, of course, as specialists, you're all interested in this, but also from a political economy perspective, there are often standoffs. There are tensions between states, between the center and the state. We have had lots of progressive policies in the last 25, 30 years in trying to manage the fiscal situation in the country. Of course, where we are today collectively, if you look at all India numbers, then of course the macro indicators look very stable. Your inflation is under control. You can see that the fiscal deficit is pretty much under control from where we inherited all of this, let's say, 10, 12 years back. It's a far cry. The banks have had a major cleanup. So things are looking better from that perspective if you look at all India. But this is not a crowd that I have to, help appreciate the fact that it's a very large country. State governments are extremely powerful. They are empowered to spend money the way they want. Of course, we have laws, we have rules in the form of fiscal responsibility and budget management, etc., which do bear upon the decisions. And of course, there is a creeping worry that electoral politics often does push states into promising and sometimes even embarking on fiscal irresponsibility, from a longer term perspective. So we are going to talk about that. So broadly, public finance management, and I want to also help you appreciate that it goes beyond the accounting. There are deeper long-term economic costs to doing populist measures, as a result of which you will see long-term trends getting impacted on account of some of these. So let's start first of all by saying that India is a very large country. I'm going to show you 30-year trends to help you appreciate that it's not enough to just look at budget to budget, which is what typically public finance experts do. That every year you look at the budget and you talk about the deficits or a special announcement. I think longer term trends and real trends from a per capita basis help you understand what the relative difference between states, how do they stand. So just, it's a very large country. Not all, this is telling you the way different states are growing, the per capita GDP of the states, the way they are growing with the base year of 2004-5. Not all our states are growing the same way, right? You do have breakout states. In fact, what you notice is Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, Sikkim, Haryana, Uttarakhand. These are states that are bucking the all India trend. And we call them breakout because they're just beating the all India averages and they are moving ahead much faster. It's also important to understand that, and let's make this static to appreciate this a bit better. that the difference between, let's say, Goa, Delhi, two of the richest states of the country, and let's say Bihar, it's almost 12-fold, 12 times. So that's the kind of per capita variation we are looking at in the country. In the long term, of course, we want to bridge this. There has to be either innovation in terms of cross-state policies, in terms of just the way the Finance Commission operates, perhaps think of different welfare targets through which, beyond the point, divergences need curtailment, right? Need some kind of a sensitivity. Here I want to show you that the growth rate, which I showed you in the form of horse plots today, if you just now begin to look at the states one at a time, then you notice that, at an all India level, the per capita again has not grown the same, but there was an inflection point. When we think of growth post 1990, it's not been uniform. In fact, in the first 10 years of liberalization, the average growth rate was 3.9, and the next 20 years it has been almost 5%, right? So there was a point of inflection at that point, and I'll later show how there was also a point of inflection around 14, 15. You will see that in the numbers themselves. But very important to note that almost all states of the country have grown faster in the last 25 years than they did in the first 10 years of liberalization. Right? So growth that's why we say this is, it's exponential in nature. Every state, barring one. Right? In case of West Bengal, this is our only state which actually had a growth rate which was faster in the first 10 years than subsequent. The second thing that stands out, if you just look at the growth numbers, is a state like Bihar, which actually had a negative growth rate in the first 10 years. In fact, the average per capita GDP of Bihar in 1991 and 2005 are nearly identical. So at a time when the rest of the country is growing, here is a state that basically deteriorated and then it went back to being the way it was. So 15 years, no change in per capita. It's important to understand that fiscal situation and the state budgets, each state is faced with its own set of concerns, and we'll talk a little bit about Bihar and being agricultural, what it means. But we will also talk about other states, the fast-growing ones, the smaller states, and the kind of peculiar problems that they have to handle. So we are going to look at how are the state growth numbers associated with their revenue, their expenditure, and also their capital outlay, which is a very good indicator for long-term growth. Let's begin with the revenue per capita. And here, of course, you hear the north-south, the fear in terms of the population divergences, etc. In these states, by the way, are rank ordered in terms of growth rate over the last 25 years. So this is the way the states are rank ordered. Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, and so on. Now, what you notice here, the red line is giving you all India average per capita revenue for each of these states, right? Here again, you will notice that in around the year 2000, there is a structural break, even in terms of revenue each states have. After that, you see there is an increase. What you notice is that the fast-growing states, almost the first and the second column, they're fast. They have a lot more revenue compared to the all India average. Towards the bottom, you will see the states where the blue lines, which is the state-specific revenue, much lower than the national average. So it's not true that the state or the government is spending similar amounts throughout the country. It's very important to understand that the government spends far more in fast-growing state. Of course, we will also talk about where is this revenue coming from. A lot of it is generated by these states. But there are big differences if you look at how much we spend across states. For instance, if you look at Bihar. In Bihar, we spend a little over, let's say, 6,000 rupees per person, right? Per year. That's the kind of state spending that we are talking, state revenue we are talking about. Just look at Gujarat, just look at Tamil Nadu. Those numbers are in excess of, it's almost 16,000, 17,000. So there is a big difference in terms of just the government spending itself. Right? If you go beyond, then you notice that smaller states have a lot more revenue, meaning they have a lot more budget. They really are able to put together resources. Look at Sikkim, look at Mizoram, Uttarakhand, all of them. Much. There are multiples of what we do at the All India level. So smaller states have significantly higher revenue per capita compared even to the fast growing large states. In fact, Arunachal Pradesh, we have around 60,000 per person. Compare that with Gujarat's 12,000 per person. Now, these are fast growing. I'm just trying to sensitize you to the fact that small states, by virtue of being small, but also many of them are border states, right? So they do have more resources. There are law and order issues, all kinds of concerns because of which, but this is worth keeping in mind when we get to the revenue generating capability and why we have to think a little bit further about some of them. Now, here is the own tax revenue generation, right? The own tax, just look at the kind of revenue Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, Telangana, Haryana, Kerala, Maharashtra, Karnataka, Delhi. Look at those fast growing states and the kind of taxes they are generating. And then look at the bottom two rows, right? Huge variations. These guys are all in excess, multiples of all India average, while what you see, the kind of revenue that is generated. Again, I will focus on Bihar. Just look at Bihar here. What do you notice? Bihar generates very little revenue. Now, it's actually a fast growing state. If you just look at the last 5-6 years, agriculture sector is witnessing one of the fastest growth. And what is really impressive about Bihar's agricultural growth is the kind of diversification, something we are struggling in several other parts of the country. But Bihar has very successfully diversified in ways which are keeping up with the changing demand and also what the needs are, right? But agriculture is not taxed. And hence, the revenue that the state is able to generate on account of that is very limited. Also remember, other big revenue generate, in the form of taxing alcohol. It's a dry state, so that leads to its own set of revenue concerns. The quality of the growth matters for revenue. What we are saying is each of these states are not following the same. In fact, if you look at the 5 states on the top, Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, Telangana, Haryana, and Kerala, they are generating revenues from very different sources. Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, overwhelmingly fast growth in manufacturing. Telangana has been manufacturing and services. Haryana, again, manufacturing, and Kerala, again, largely on account of processing as well as services, right? Again, if you look below Karnataka, and there's a lot of variation in the sectors from where this revenue is getting generated. Look at the own tax revenue generation in the small states. They are very little. So remember when I told you how much revenue they have? And compare it with the revenue that they are generating. Now, not all small states are not generating revenue. Look at Sikkim, Uttarakhand, right? Look at Goa, look at Himachal Pradesh. They are generating revenue. Goa is generating tremendous amount of revenue. Of course, it's on account of mines, it's on account of tourism, etc. Right? But look at Uttarakhand and Sikkim. In fact, there is a paper we just published which compares Uttarakhand and Himachal Pradesh, because it's a bit of like a natural experiment. In 2003, the government of India announced, it came up with a policy, industrial policy for hilly states. And the states were asked to submit proposal. And Himachal and Uttarakhand had almost similar proposals for industrialization. Similar transport, similar financial subsidies, almost entirely identical, except in one regard, which is land use and town planning. I'm trying to get to some of the existing innovations, which is also keeping our growth around 6.5. And I think the kind of innovation required in land use and town planning, and therefore in this budget you have heard the finance minister, and you're going to see repeated lots of announcements in terms of town planning and urbanization, improving the infrastructure and the governance cities are going to become the focus, because the last 10 years we have largely focused on interstate and connectivity and infrastructure, which is mostly in the form of highways and ports and airports, etc. Now the focus gradually has to be towards cities and improvement. But in any case, land use is a very important innovation. The lack of reforms in land is keeping many states. Now, the Uttarakhand and Himachal Pradesh experiment is interesting because the difference is that in Himachal Pradesh, and I do encourage you to download and read that paper, Himachal Pradesh, they came up with identical in Himachal in terms of land use, and town planning basically said, we will allow the industrialists to go and buy the land directly from the farmers, which sounds fine, it sounds right. But Uttarakhand did something more. They said, we will procure and we will build 3 large special economic zones. Right? We will build industrial clusters. We will make the initial investment in terms of putting basic infrastructure, radial roads, water, etc., electricity. We will do all of that and then hand it over to the industry. It took them about 3 years. So in the first 3 years, you see Himachal doing well, attracting investments and so on. But within the next 10 years, Uttarakhand, which used to have only 60% of the per capita income of Himachal, within 10 years has nearly double that of Himachal. If you look at the number of jobs created, they have created nearly 2.5 times more jobs because of the nature and extent of industrialization that this kind of innovation allowed them to. So what I'm trying to tell you is that there is so much of innovation and there is so much in terms of ease of doing business that rests with the state administration. And we are over time going to see states which are entrepreneurial, states which are getting their basic acts together. You will see them not just industrializing, but just seeing growth in terms of all other sectors also. Wealth creation is directly leading to job creation. Fast-growing states also generate far more jobs. Right? So it's important, therefore, to talk about these kind of things on the ground. Now, in terms of many of our northeastern states, it's important to know that they have very limited revenue generating capability. And this is despite 20 years of policy where 10% of all our development spending, large central schemes, goes towards the northeast. Right? It has not translated into these states, barring Sikkim. Sikkim really does stand out, especially because again, there is an experiment, a natural experiment, and I hope someone will write this up. They are twice as rich as Bhutan, right? So Sikkim is generating revenue and it's plowing it back, and it's a good growth story. And yet, within the Northeast, it really is just limited to Sikkim, right? So, the peculiarity, when people try to put up the peculiarity of the other states, the other Northeastern states, and basically the reasons you hear, the excuses you hear, that's actually, there is of course an element of truth in all of that, but you're also seeing that despite all of that, there are states which are innovating and generating large amounts of revenue, and hence you can see that in the form of reducing poverty. You see that in better health education outcome, just more industries, more jobs, better outcome on the whole. Now, just a few minutes on expenditure before I get to the more exciting bit. In terms of expenditure, if you look at that red line, which is the all India average, do you see that here there is a structural break again around 2014. So first structural break happens around 2000. And the second is around 13, 14, when you see after 14, there is a pickup. The expenses really pick up. States really begin to spend a lot. Right? So high growth states spend much higher amounts than low growth states. And that's a no-brainer. The fast growing ones are generating more revenue. They're spending. Just look at their spending. Look at Tamil Nadu, look at Telangana, look at Haryana, look at Kerala. Look at their spending much, much above the red line, all India average, right? At the same time, look at the bottom two rows. Look at Bihar, Madhya Pradesh. Look at West Bengal, right? Look at Uttar Pradesh. Uttar Pradesh is trying to do a catch-up now, but it has had nearly 2 decades of, very, very low state expenditures. Jharkhand. But look at the top 2 rows. Spending is enormous. The gap increasing for some states. In fact, what is worth noting is just look at places like West Bengal. You see the spending between all India average and the spending within Bengal, that gap is increasing. So the nation as a whole is spending more and more because it's generating a lot of revenue, right? But in places which are slowing down, there the gap, you see. So that is what, when you see there are divergences in growth, a large part of it has to do with the way the state is managing its revenue and its expenditure, right? And agriculture is not taxed. So your taxes are therefore going to come from the other two sectors, right? And if you're not going to see rapid industrialization, if you're not going to see expansion in the services sector, etc., you are going to see spending remain quite low, right? Of course, you also spend by borrowing, and we will get to that in a minute. Punjab, now here is an interesting thing worth noting. The spending in Punjab per person is around 20,000 rupees, right? Actually, that is more than your fastest growing states of Gujarat. So a slow growing state spends far more than a fast growing state. And we'll get to what does that do to the quality of growth of the state. If you look at the spending, overall spending can be broken into development and non-development. The main non-development spending is in the form of pension, interest payment, and administrative expenditure. These are the three things which are non-development because they are not really feeding into the growth. The rest are all development, right? And development from social sector, from economic sector, but they're all feeding into long-term growth, right? The non-developmental pensions, interest burden, administrative burden. And here you will notice the pink band, the yellow band is development, and the pink band is the non-development. The green is, of course, grants in aid and contributions. What do you notice here? That the development expenditure as a share of the total expenditure, it declined in the first 10 years of liberalization. So our development expenditure on the whole narrowed and then it began to expand. Right? Kerala and Punjab, they stand out, have higher non-development expenditure. Why? Because they spend a lot in terms of interest burden, pensions, and having states which are relatively inefficient, meaning you spend a lot on running of the state. So Kerala and Punjab stand out because their non-development spending remains much, much higher than their development spending. Elsewhere, you will notice that your development spending is almost entirely, it's more than 50% of your overall expenditure, and that's a good thing because it feeds into your long-term growth. Now, the non-development, what falls under that? One of the biggest burden which you read in the newspapers, which often end up in the Supreme Court, etc., is the interest payment, right? If you look at interest payment, how much of the states, how much does it spend to basically service its debt? And what is the relationship with development expenditure? Meaning, how much are you spending in terms of furnishing debt? And how does, relative to your spending on development, because there is a trade-off. And what do you notice in the first 10, 12 years post-liberalization? That do you see the red line escalating? Every state after state, they were spending more and more and more in just servicing their debt. What do you notice after 2002-03? This is FRBM. Do you see the red line falling? And it has fallen for every state. This is what laws, FRBM, this is what basically tying our hands down through means of legal apparatus helps us achieve. It really did discipline us. The Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act has tied states to a certain level of fiscal deficit. So you'll see that the escalating interest payment as a percentage of development spending, it then began to recover. And every state you are seeing the same trajectory, right? So therefore, laws are important. It's important to look at. Even though today, if you just look at interest payment, what are the states which are paying far above? So as I look at Kerala almost 40%, that is the 40% of their development spending is what they're spending in terms of interest payment. That's the kind of debt burden that a state like Kerala has. Again, look at Tamil Nadu. Tamil Nadu, it did really well until very recently when you see the blue lines rising. Haryana, again the same, right? But then look at the other states. Look at how Maharashtra, look at Karnataka. Karnataka, very well managed. Delhi, look at Andhra, look at Odisha, all of these states. Again, Punjab continues to remain a huge concern because Punjab's spending as a percentage of the development is very, very high, in excess of 50%. Everywhere else you are seeing this decline. So today the interest burden is largely, so the states which are borrowing beyond their means, that's what we are saying, is truly in states like Kerala. Just look at Punjab, look at West Bengal. West Bengal did recover, but it remains significantly higher than all India averages. That is the reason we worry. What about pension, that other big non-developmental spending? Are you seeing the pension burden at an all India level? Do you see in the first 10 years of liberalization, do you see how exponentially it grew? The first 10 years, it just rushed because, we have pensions, people are living and longer and we have to pay. And it's a non-development and it's eating into our development budget. We have less and less money. But what happened after that? We brought in the pension reform. Right? These are all extremely responsible reforms that were brought in. After that, what do you see? What do you see around the year 2003-04 again? Do you see that this escalation that happened in terms of the pension spending again stabilized? It continues to grow because we live longer and so the payout is there. But do you see that exponential rise stabilized post-pension reform, state after state? So now when states go back on those pension reforms, then it is a real cost. But even today, just look at Tamil Nadu, for instance. It remains significantly high. Their pension burden is very large. Look at Kerala. Kerala's numbers are dwarfing the all India. Do you see the red line relative to Kerala's pension burden? That red line looks dwarfed. It looks very small. And mind you, the red line is the same for all states because this is all India average. It just looks higher for places like Telangana because Telangana is very similar to the all India average. For Gujarat, it looks high because it's very similar. Look at Kerala because in Kerala, pension is 40% in excess. That's the kind of pension burden. And therefore, in fact, I'll show you for Himachal as well. Look at Assam, look at Punjab, again, very high, right? So this kind of non-development spending, when the burden rises, what are we basically saying? That we have less, these states have less to spend on development. They'll not have enough money for schools and colleges and hospitals and roads and the kind of urban infrastructure and improving rural infrastructure, connectivity, etc., which is what long-term growth requires. The third component of the non-development spending is what we call administrative services expenditure. And we are going to look at it as a percentage of the state domestic product, right? Now, it's important to see that state after state, this burden has lowered, right? Because every state is growing, and as the states grow, the administrative expenses are not growing as much. So now, as a relative share, it is falling, but not everywhere. And I think that is the big lesson. That you have places like, if you look at Meghalaya, for instance, from 5, it's gone to, from 4, it has gone to 5%. From 4.3 in Manipur, it has gone to 7. So a lot of these, new states, they are increasing. They are increasing their administrative expenses, right? These are 3 tranches. These are the high growing states where the burden will reduce. These are the middle growth and the low growth states. If you don't have enough growth, administrative, but the state spending is continuing to increase relatively in these slow growing states. And so you will see the burden increase, right? But of course, minimum state is required to run a government. So we don't want this to go down to 0. In fact, we want administrative expenses and the quality of this to get better. The idea is not to continue lowering it, but as a percentage of the state GDP, it must continue to become more efficient. Look at the capital outlay. I'm particularly I watch this statistics very closely because capital outlay for development is a very good proxy for long-term growth prospects of the state, right? Here, what do you notice? Look at Gujarat. I mean, they're spending a lot in terms of long-term growth. Look at Tamil Nadu. It has now begun to pick up. Telangana, high, very high. Haryana, right? Important to note, look at Delhi. Delhi used to be a positive outlier. Delhi spent a lot of money in core infrastructure and improvement around the Commonwealth Games. So you see how Delhi, those blue bars are towering over the all India averages. We spend a lot of money in Delhi in sprucing up Delhi's core infrastructure. And then after 2015, it's almost like a change in administration can have tremendous impact on fortunes of a state's infrastructure. What do you notice? Delhi then becomes a negative outlier. So Delhi used to spend much more on its infrastructure relative to all India average. After 15, it has consistently spent very little. Right? Which is why if you visit Delhi, especially from Hyderabad, you will feel like the infrastructure has not kept pace with the growth in the city population and so on. So therefore, the incidence of flooding, etc., continues to grow. Look at Odisha. Odisha is it's a remarkable state in terms of how they've managed their not just fiscal, but also the kind of spending they're doing. Look at the amount they're spending in terms of capital outlay. Of course, remember, it's a revenue-rich state because they have mines, right? They have almost zero interest payment. They have very little credit to furnish. The interest payments are very low. They're a resource-rich state. Look at West Bengal. One of the reasons we worry about the long-term prospects of West Bengal, there is almost no capital outlay. It is not just significantly low, but it continues to fall. Without capital outlay, without a government spending on long-term these infrastructure, how is growth sustained? Right? These are the big issues one gets concerned when you look at it. So now overall, it's important to understand that the public finance is more than just an accounting exercise. Right? We're not just going to say, how much are you spending? And sometimes you often hear, sometimes you hear people say that, if a state has bad policies, it's okay if they have the money. And this is where, the economics of it is very different from accounting. You have the money today, but if you continue to have distortionary policies, economically not sound policy, you are going to run out of that budget because industry, services, businesses, they're not static. They move. And in a time when states are competing for business, competing for jobs, you cannot continue to over-regulate, charge them too much for power at a time when states are trying to attract, right? So these major trends are telling you about what is happening. There are limits to cross-subsidization, right? And the story of Punjab really does tell you a little bit about what happens if you try and cross-subsidize agriculture too much by keeping industry, by charging very high rate of power or over-regulating extremely stringent labor laws, etc. Industry moves. And we have seen that in the last 20 years, Punjab has seen active de-industrialization. They have moved away. They have moved to Himachal, they have moved to Haryana, they have moved to Rajasthan. Some have gone as further down as, let's say, Tamil Nadu. But industry is looking for a conducive home. There is a lot of competitive federalism today when it comes to attracting investments and particularly jobs in industry. So there are limits to cross-subsidization. You're not going to have money forever just because you have it today, right? Incentives matter. We are going to now go a little bit into the detail. We have looked at the state budget. Now we will look at how different institutions, how we are positioned. And I will pick up a few sectors that I study closely because they pertain to long-term productivity of the nation. Now, this is the story of Punjab. This is the per capita net state domestic product, right, at factor cost. What do you notice? This is an all-India growth story. Every state of the country is growing. So that is not surprising. Important to note, though, that just 18, 19 years back, Punjab used to be the richest state in the country. Punjab is the black line, the thick black line, because this is the story of Punjab and deindustrialization. Do you see that it was richer than all its states? It was, in fact, if you remember the first graph where you're looking at the way GDP is growing, Punjab is right at the top after Goa and Delhi. So the richest state, right? Because Goa is a small state, Delhi is not even a full state. Goa also just became a state. So Punjab has historically been breadbasket, a very, very affluent part of the country. But within 18 to 20 years, what do you notice? All the neighbors have now overtaken Punjab. In fact, the most interesting example is Punjab and Haryana. Punjab used to be richer than Haryana 18 years back. Today, an average Haryanavi, and by the way, these numbers are only up to 2019. The latest numbers are that an average Haryanavi is 2.5 times richer than an average Punjabi. That's the kind of gap we are seeing between neighbors. Okay. And when you have lifting, the tide lifting, all boats lifting, it's a good story. It's a positive story, and there is growth and so on. Here there is growth. But the relative slowdown, where the others are racing ahead, that's the kind of growth potential we are talking about. There are pain points here. And Punjab's this relative slowness is on account of the fact that Punjab continues to cross-subsidize agriculture by being, charging very high power rate, just having excessive over-regulated labor markets, having very limited investments in its infrastructure, etc. Right? So this is why I say that when people say, well, state budgets, if you have the money, you spend the way you want. That's not true. You have the money today, but if you do not spend it in a way that it meets the incentives of your job creators and your wealth creators, then they will move. Right? Important thing to also note that agriculture is a very important sector. But agriculture is not like services and industry. There's a ceiling to how much agricultural productivity can increase. In fact, the more the advancement in agriculture, the fewer the jobs, because usually it is followed with mechanization. So what happens when you cross-subsidize excessively? Industry moved. And this rapid deindustrialization has meant that the dependence on agriculture and the entrenched groups have become even more resistant to change. So the solutions then have to be either political in nature, where you have change in your policy, leadership, etc., or it has to be in the form of a new act, a law, which is what the farm laws were meant to bring about. And we are only talking public finances and jobs. Think about the water table in Punjab. I don't know how many of you are familiar, but the water table in Punjab has absolutely fallen. And this is because the free diesel has meant that we are growing paddy in a place where it doesn't rain very much. And that kind of over-utilization of groundwater resources has meant there is active desertification of Punjab. Right? This is no longer about one or two sectors or just managing your fiscal. These are long-term geological disasters, right? Which is why it becomes important to study states, not just budgets, but their economic policy and what is their vision for growth. Because this will particularly begin to look jarring and fall behind the rest of the country, where you are seeing the kind of progress and growth of this nature. I also want to spend a minute in telling you that, the variations is not just in terms of the fundamentals of how the economy of states are run. When we think of the state, when we think of healthcare sector, India does not have one healthcare sector. Every state has a very peculiar mix of public and private. Right? So if you look at, here is a graph which tells you across all states of the country, what is the dependence of the bottom, let's say 50%, on public healthcare and private healthcare. The orange bars are private healthcare and the blue ones are public. What do you notice? That in states like Odisha, Kerala, Jammu Kashmir, Tamil Nadu, Himachal, overwhelmingly the poor people are dependent, poor meaning bottom 50%, they are dependent on public healthcare. Whereas Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Jharkhand, Punjab, Telangana, Haryana, overwhelmingly people depend on private healthcare. So the nature of the industry or the sector, the healthcare sector, is very different across states. Why should I be concerned about it? Well, the reason I'm concerned, it has a direct impact on my financing. Why? Because we are running now. This is the baseline year 15-16. Things, I'm likely to evaluate this soon to find out what is the situation today. But why should I be concerned? Well, I'm concerned because we now have Ayushman Bharat, which is publicly financed health insurance scheme, right? But it is a financial instrument. It is really just a financial instrument which is meant to buy you healthcare, which is then provided from either a public, which means a government health provider, or a private health provider. And they don't function the same. What you notice, the first thing in this, is that people often, there are myths. We have very simplistic thinking when we say, perhaps, rich people go to private, it's just the poor people who go to government. But if that is the case, then you look at Odisha, Kerala, Jammu Kashmir, Tamil Nadu, Himachal. They are not poor states. Okay, even if you discount Odisha. At the same time, the rich going to private, well, you have UP, Bihar, Jharkhand, three of your poorest states, coexisting at the bottom with Punjab, Telangana, Haryana, three of your richest states. So it's not true. This is where policy making, this is where economic policy in India needs a lot more economic intelligence. We have to look at the data to understand what is the reality on the ground. It's not true the rich go to government, corporate and poor go to government. Not true at all. In fact, I'm showing you state-wise. I can show you that for a place like Kerala and Tamil Nadu, let's say. By the way, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, I'm clubbing them to tell a larger story, but they are very different if you look at the two states in terms of their healthcare sector. If you look at quintile groups, here I'm telling you about the poorest, but if you look at all quintile, from the poorest to the richest, you will see that in places like Kerala, Tamil Nadu, people across quintile group go to district hospital when there is an emergency. Whereas if you go to UP, Bihar, Telangana and Punjab, across quintile group, people will go to private corporate hospitals, rich and poor. So the lesson here is, when it functions well, everybody prefers to go to a government hospital. When it doesn't work, then everybody, including the poorest, prefer to go to a good private doctor. Okay, so it has to do with the quality of care. Going back to Ayushman Bharat, what does good quality here mean? Even if I fall sick today, I'm in Delhi and we have lots of big corporate hospitals here. But when I fall sick, I would any day go and meet a doctor, a friend, a co-author, somebody at AIIMS, because I can trust them. Quality means trust. But what is trust got to do? Well, it's a market where you have incredible information asymmetry. Only the doctor knows whether you need one stent or two stents. Right? And we know that if you look at the health outcomes, then just look at deliveries. That C-section, 50% of deliveries in private hospital are C-section today. Whereas in government hospital, that number is below 15%. So what is happening? Well, that is what market breakdowns mean. Market failure means that in sectors like health, and particularly if it is financed by insurance, you are going to see overutilization of facilities. That is why I am concerned that I have publicly financed healthcare, but if that healthcare is going to be from private sector, provided by the private sector, I must prepare for a cost escalation. There will be cost escalation. That is just the economics of it. So how will then publicly financed and privately provided cost escalation, we should be prepared to spend more and more. That is why the US spends 18% of its GDP on healthcare. And its outcomes are actually the worst amongst OECD. In fact, their outcome is similar to, let's say, Singapore. And you know how much Singapore spends on healthcare? 4%. So it's not how much money you are throwing at these problems. It's the nature of financing, right? So this private-public mix and what kind of incentives and how do I design financial instruments to finance healthcare? And we can make similar argument when it comes to primary education and elsewhere. So these are standard market failures and we have to be prepared, right? Very quickly, we are introducing a lot of new kinds of instruments in public finance. In fact, the state of Madhya Pradesh 3 years back has announced an 8,000 crores outcome fund, right? I know that there is interest amongst other. Meghalaya is thinking about something where basically the state says, here is a pot of money. I'm struggling in dealing with certain social or development outcomes, quality of education, enrollment of girls, quality of hospitals or private, let's say health clinics, etc. These are long-term problems the state is struggling. So now I basically have this outcome fund. I want private sector to invest in improving this. And if somehow you're able to improve it, I will pay you a very handsome amount based on the improvement, the nature of the improvement. That's how impact bonds, etc. are getting designed. We have had very successful experiments in Rajasthan, in Madhya Pradesh, in UP, right? And of course, going beyond impact bonds, we also have the rising case of municipal bonds, where increasingly states are looking at novel means of raising urban finance for long-term urban investments. Climate finance, there is increased places like social stock exchange where they are engaged in designing new kinds of instruments. I also encourage those of you who are interested in this area to talk about it. So, broadly, Nupur, those are just some big touching points. Everything that I talked to you about is in some published work. It has been part of, wide array of things. But if anything excites you, go do a Google search. You will get the paper. Anything which you missed, do write. We'll be happy to share it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Shamika. Firstly, very cool graphics. And I know from your Twitter posts and your other work that you actually portray or depict your work very intuitively. So it's not a surprise for me, but still very cool graphics. So thank you so much. And very informative for someone like me who's not really into the subject, but I'm sure most of the participants also got a very nuanced understanding of public finances in the country through your presentations. Now, I have a few questions, and I'll also urge the participants to type their questions in the chat box. I'll try to take up as many of them as possible. Send it to me privately if you wish. So my first question to you, Shamika, is that clearly the state of affairs in Bihar versus, let's say, Goa is very, very, the gap is very wide and it is concerning. I am from erstwhile Bihar, now in the Jharkhand region. So I know firsthand the kind of infrastructure and the kind of spending that goes on there. And now I'm living in Telangana for the past almost 22, 23 years. And the difference is stark. How do we bridge that gap? Any, a few pointers that you would like to really mention?
I think we have a federal system, yes, which means that there are a broad set of parameters on which we would like every Indian everywhere to have certain basic things, right? In fact, that is the reason why we embarked upon this whole saturation policy, which is that basic amenities, and that basket of basic amenities we will continue to enhance. But basic things, electricity, drinking water, bank accounts, titling, mobile telephony, and that housing, toilets, all of that all Indians everywhere will have these things, right? And I think because you have that kind of entrepreneurial leadership, that is number one. Number two, these are well-defined targets. And therefore, it is not surprising that with the kind of innovations you've had in Jan Dhan Aadhaar Mobile, this JAM, because of which DBT, direct benefit transfer, which now the IMF and OECD call logistic marvels, have expanded in massive ways. So much so, by one estimate, we are saving 1.5% of our GDP in doing this kind of direct benefit transfer. So there are going to be certain things we will ensure everybody has everywhere. Beyond that, the states in our country are very powerful, and every state makes its own economic destiny.
Yeah.
Right? And that is why local leadership becomes so important. When local leadership is entrepreneurial and visionary, you have seen. I mean, we have the example of Chandrababu Naidu, Prime Minister Modi himself. Now you are seeing in the case of now, the Uttarakhand, Himachal example was meant to showcase. Look at Sikkim, the kind of changes you are seeing in UP today with their the zeal for 1 trillion and the kind of industrial policy, etc., they're putting in place. I think local leadership matters a great deal. And as far as quality of life is concerned, I think this is where an empowered citizenry, people, society as a whole, that also makes a huge impact. So, there are many in Goa. I'm glad you asked. Goa, Kerala and all. If a nurse is not there or an A&M is not there in the primary health center, I can assure you there will be a demonstration. Right? And so what that tells you is that these are virtuous sides. That is the whole idea of democracy. People must demand and the state must provide.
Absolutely.
And it's a two-way street.
Absolutely. So also that brings me to, because you said Goa, Kerala, people demand it. So I think it was also the population in a way. For example, if you look at, let's say, Singapore and India, right? A lot of things which work in Singapore, it's because the size is so small, it's much easier to manage. So Goa and Delhi are much smaller when compared to, let's say, a Bihar or Uttar Pradesh. And maybe that's the reason, that's one of the reasons why it perhaps leadership is one factor, literacy is another factor, and size is definitely, I think, another factor.
That is true. Traditionally, we have seen the evidence tells you that the smaller states, therefore, are better governed, they are faster growing, and so on. But an average in India, it doesn't explain very much. We really have to look state by state. That is the reason I focused a little bit on the northeastern and the smaller states.
So what's happening?
Look at Sikkim, right?
What's happening in Sikkim?
12x increase in consumption per capita. In fact, I haven't shown you, I mean, we have time restriction here, but I do want you all to read the latest numbers on poverty. I do want you to look at what is happening to consumption. People, poverty is measured in terms of consumption. 12 times increase in the last 12, 13 years. That is the kind of growth some of our states are witnessing, right? I think size matters, but then if size were the only thing, then Bihar is twice as poor as UP.
Right.
Right. But you all know this. It's never one factor.
Yeah.
And the only reason I'm emphasizing on leadership is because, as economists, we do a very bad job of modeling and explaining leadership. And the reason is, we look at past data to predict future. But the whole idea of leadership is to break that trend.
Right. So in fact, you know Hyderabad so well, and I've always said this, that from Chandrababu Naidu's time, every successive government in Telangana has done a lot for Hyderabad. And hence you see so much growth here. And when you compare it to Karnataka, so while Karnataka has had strong leadership, but you don't see that kind of, it's grown because of the entrepreneurial, I would say, ecosystem there. But in terms of infrastructure, you don't see those changes. So one of your slides on the same topic, it showed that Karnataka, the development expenditure is much higher than the national expenditure. You don't see it on the ground when you go to Bangalore or even nearby places.
That's correct. You see, one thing people haven't perhaps realized about Bangalore. We had done a study. Bangalore, you know how many mother tongues are spoken in Bangalore? And I'll tell you why mother tongue. Of course, now it is political and so on. But mother tongue is a very good proxy for saying, where do people come from? in Bangalore, you have 108 languages being spoken.
Wow.
108 means there are people from Northeast, there are people from Kashmir, there are people from Bengal, all over the country, people move to Bangalore. Why? Because that's where the economic opportunities, the growth, the potential. I mean, that's the whole idea of having a cosmopolitan city which can attract talent from everywhere, right? Which is why I get particularly dismayed when I see this kind of extremely narrow-minded politics around keeping, this whole outsider-insider kind of debates, which are myopic. I think they serve short-term electoral interest, but in the long term, it comes in the way. Now, I think Hyderabad has been particularly lucky, because what Chandrababu Naidu did, his opponent, YSR, when he came in, doubled down. Though, of course, the elections are contested by saying he has done everything wrong. But when the policies were enacted, he did exactly the same and more.
Yeah.
Right? And that kind of continuity in policy and continuity, I think, in aspiration. And by the way, we have seen this in some states, that when the leadership changes, when the parties change, you undo, which brings all kinds of uncertainty. So I think Hyderabad has been lucky. And I think that is where Bangalore has been unlucky. There is continuity in a bad equilibrium, and here is a continuity in a very good equilibrium.
Punjab stands out for its relative slowness vis-a-vis India on almost all parameters, and it's also striking because we also did a study on Punjab some time back on family businesses, and what we found was that around the early 1990s, there were a lot of companies which actually did very well in Punjab. They came out of Ludhiana, Chandigarh, Jalandhar, and slowly all those companies shifted their base to Delhi or Mumbai or Noida, but they moved out of Punjab. So it's clearly either the ease of doing business or the overall economic environment in Punjab, and the state is definitely losing because of non-development expenditure that it does and not concentrate on development.
When we were in high school, I distinctly remember all the bicycles came from Punjab.
Yes.
All our sports equipments, all the fancy balls, the bats, everything came from Punjab.
Yes.
Knitwear.
Correct.
Nothing of that nature is coming from there, right?
Yes.
And remember, I think it's also what hastens the deindustrialization or the movement away that you're explaining is also because the other states are now competing for these businesses.
Yeah.
Because these are the kind of industries which are labor intensive. They actually give a lot of new jobs. So I think the state, when we say the state is missing out, it's actually young people who are not seeing jobs, who are not seeing a future. And of course, it's a border state, so which means the problems are therefore magnified. And we have a epidemic in terms of mental health, substance abuse, etc. So we have seen repeated mental health surveys being done because it's a very vicious, bad long-term equilibrium we have.
Yes. So I have a question on, actually not a question, maybe some other time. It'd be really interesting to see gender-based numbers on health spending by states.
Right.
My hunch tells me that in states like Bihar and even Gujarat, for that matter, you might see expenditure on women being much lower than expenditure on men. And it would be really interesting to see how that pans out.
Yeah.
That's one.
Yeah, there is one that NIPFP, we had worked with WCD Ministry.
Okay.
Of course, it was from a gender budgeting perspective.
Okay.
But there is there are many. Spending is one part of it. Of course, the concern is why do we still have so many states which are not able to spend the money? Right? So that is where the state capacity comes in. That today, perhaps, budget is not your biggest constraints. It's ideas, how to do it.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't have the local manpower, right? Think of why is it that state after state or party after party prefers to roll out a cash transfer scheme trained to women rather than saying, we will improve the Anganwadi and we will improve the primary health center and the kind of things that you're thinking of.
Yes.
So state capacity is not a quick fix.
Right.
that will require a lot of work.
Yes. Now, this is something which will include the chartered accountants actually, that with increasing public investment and government-backed credit schemes, what do you think are the emerging roles for, let's say, chartered accountants in public finance management or in government advisory or infrastructure financing?
I think we need to really expand the supply of chartered account. The profession has to expand.
Right.
And there is a great deal of talk today when we are thinking of creating our own big four, creating our own audit firms, creating our own cadre of chartered accountants who can give a real-time view of how things are.
Right.
Of course, it is needed for the state finances, and that's where the professional services and professional sort of technical know-how feeding into this kind of real-time decision making. I think that is very, very important. But beyond the government, I think this over-reliance on the foreign firms, which, by the way, even when we are thinking of the profession, we are thinking of the business as usual. Even that is changing when we think of rating, when we think of, the rules and the norms are now getting rewritten.
Right.
So if we don't have our own cadre of people and our own firms, there are many things which are of national interest. But we just don't have the core capacity right now to be able to do many of these because the dependence on these external agencies. So I think we have been definitely talking to Ministry of Corporate Affairs. We have been talking to various other bodies as well in order to say what is needed,
right,
to expand our core competence and people. We need more skilled people in the profession.
So I think I've covered most of the questions which have come. There's one last question. It's how do you see the intersection of technology? I mean, we can't leave the webinar without addressing AI and blockchain and big data and all that. So how do you see this intersection of technology with, let's say, public financial accountability, and how do the finance professionals prepare for the shift?
I think one is there is a lot of uncertainty regarding what it will do to different professions, right? I think the mechanical part of it, Nupur, it's not just in this space, in every space. The mechanical part of it, because the machines are able to do better and faster. You're seeing this in the generative AI, for instance, right? I mean, increasingly, I find that some of these softwares can read my graphs far better than, if I have to think and write and what else is there. And it quickly will give you 10-point summary and so on. No, that's actually, it enhances your productivity, right? So there are mechanical things, I think we should get used to it. In fact, our new training must be that let's not waste too much time now doing and redoing the mechanical stuff. We really have to now think about what are the creative aspects of it, right? What will it mean in terms of redesigning or writing our own set of algorithms when it comes to what do we care about? What do we put more weightage on? We don't want to blindly copy paste these different, even again, I keep coming back to the rating and the ranking exercises, because remember, it's not just geopolitics. Also, investment decisions are indeed made on a lot of this kind of information, right? So we need people, we need almost every profession to really think, first think about what are the future problems likely to be. We are right now too fixated right now on doing the same thing. In fact, if you look at the curriculum, the skills really now need to adopt a lot of this AI, ML kind of training. Right from school curriculum, I think children have to be trained how to think. Now, my son is in 10th grade, so when I look at how he's learning, let's say linear equations, right, his math, and then he sees a nice, beautiful graph emerge because it's a quadratic function. So they'll be, these are beautiful ways in which, just because, technology allows you to enhance and learn in so many different ways. I think the training has to expand because, the mind, we don't know the limits of the mind. So the fear has to go out. It's not that we should worry about how many jobs AI will replace. Right now, for India, given the last mile issue with health, with education, with skills, technology is a great enabler. You'll be surprised how many training sessions of our remote doctors in Northeast, etc., are happening from doctors sitting in one of the centers in AIMS from here. They can, it is all telemedicine and algorithm and all kinds of things they're doing. We have doctors sitting in Hyderabad diagnosing ailments out of primary health centers outside Lucknow, where the ANM is basically typing all the symptoms. No, there are look at the machine learning and the large language models, for instance. Right? You are a country where more than 32 languages have more than 10 million speakers each. Massive amount possibility that this country can generate. But we need people who sit down and then, work through that. So I think sky is the limit, particularly for us. Enormous variation in data, our algorithm, etc., can be fine-tuned just given our own data.
Yeah, of course.
But we need to start preparing.
Great. So thank you so much, Shamika. Seema ji, Sengupta ji, anything from your side?
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much, ma'am. I'm having one small question regarding strengthening the fiscal coordination between the state and the center. Whether you see that there is a difference between the pre-GST era and after the implementation of GST. Anything you want to highlight?
I think GST, and we know the usual stuff, the unified market. So you have brought down the uncertainty significantly. And I think the biggest ease of doing business from a financial and a taxation side is in reducing the uncertainty of these different levies, these different kinds of taxes, state by state variations. Now, the conversation, of course, it doesn't mean we have solved the problem. The improvement has been dramatic. There's no two ways about it. But there are aspects of that which continue to remain work in progress. For instance, can we rationalize things further? Right? Within GST again, we will have to look at the rates. Sometimes seem in needing of simplification. So those kind of conversations, but I will put them a little bit in the second order problems. The first order is just getting everyone to sign in, and I think we have accomplished that rather quickly. That you have brought in a very large number of establishments onto the platform. Right? In the beginning, many people said, "Oh, all of this it's so difficult. How will people adopt?" And it's very confusing and all of that. But the system, sort of developed and it has fine-tuned in ways where there have been empirical studies. In fact, one very interesting one that the ESC had published was what has it done to interstate trade? Just the fact that you have now these kind of simpler norms and rules. This unified market has also meant it has increased interstate trade by some very, very severe magnitude. So I'm not saying we have, we don't have to worry. I think simplification, rationalization will continue. I think it's also a very important platform where the states come and negotiate. It's very important for states to come because not everyone depends on certain kinds of goods or service similarly. So some are over dependent on certain aspects, and that is where there is a lot of give and take and the kind of negotiation which is very important for a large federal market like ours.
Ma'am, one last question from my side. Fiscal sustainability we hear from various places. Any specific thing the current government has done to improve that part, ma'am, if you can highlight?
The sustainability bit, I think the politics of it often drowns out the fact that states are now trying to innovate in terms of think of the concept of green GDP, right? We know that a state like Madhya Pradesh or a state like Meghalaya will not grow GDP the way Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, or let's say Maharashtra and all have grown. Right? If you see the way they have grown, you see the kind of vision they have and what they are planning, you know that they will not play the traditional GDP game. But they have extensive green cover. They have enormous biodiversity. Now, this is where the innovation and the creativity comes in. And it is already underway that Madhya Pradesh has done a very extensive estimation of the green cover from the Indian Institute of Forest Management, I think.
Yeah,
what
right.
What that helps you do is it helps you create index funds. Right? These are carbon basins. So
Yes.
the point is their GDP, their green GDP is obviously far superior to many of our industrial states. And if that is the case, then we are going to come up with a new equilibrium where these states will have to be paid to maintain this kind of biodiversity.
Right.
Because long term, it is good for the nation as a whole. So I think there will be creativity, when it comes to those aspects of it. Then, of course, there is lifestyle for environment and what else governments in different places are doing in order to promote sustainable GDP.
Thank you. I think we can see that Mangesh sir has joined. Ma'am, Mangesh sir is CA Mangesh Kinre, the full name, and he's the chairman of Committee on Public and Government Financial Management. He's also the deputy convener of the Center of Excellence Directorate. So he's at the helm of affairs of both the committee who is organizing this particular webinar along with you. Sir, Dr. Shamika Ravi has given a presentation, and then we had a question answer between Nupur ma'am and Shamika Ravi ma'am, and she has very beautifully highlighted various dynamics of center versus state and various other factors, very interesting facts. Sir, if you can kindly give your remarks and thanks as well. Mute. Sir is in mute actually.
वैसे करो. Sorry. Now you are here. You can hear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, yes, sir.
Yeah. So first of all, let me apologize, madams and all the participants, that I could not attend this very interesting talk. In fact, we had a meeting of Government Accounting Standards Advisory Board, and it was also a day-long meeting. Entire day we were there, and we thought that it will get over by 5 o'clock. In fact, we had made arrangement also in their office for my address in the beginning. But it was so intriguing debate, and our inputs were very much necessary. That is why I thought that I can join later. But yes, I could guess from in fact, Seemaji was there, and she also briefed me during that meeting that the entire talk has gone a very interesting manner. I would personally like to listen to it on the YouTube, which we have already hosted. So, on behalf of Committee for Public and Government Financial Management of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, I really thank heartfelt gratitude to all the viewers who have joined for today's enlightening webinar of reimagining India's public finance, state capacity, fiscal federalism, and expanding landscape of the professional opportunities. Friends, as everyone has been briefing, and I just briefly heard for a minute or two Dr. Shamika Ravi, who has been a member of Economic Advisory Council to Prime Minister, and Secretary to the Government of India. I think definitely the topic might have gone in a very interesting manner. And I personally, and on behalf of the Institute, thank Madam Shamika for being sparing the valuable time and taking us through this entire interesting scenario which you were highlighting upon. So it was really as I understand, thought-provoking address, and needless to say, having your exposure, madam, the in-depth analysis would definitely, shown the actually thrown the light and enlightened many of our members on this aspect which you have dwelt upon. My special thanks to Dr. Nupur Bang, madam, who is Director cum Dean on Center of Excellence, Hyderabad, for coining this program and moderating it. Although we were held up in that meeting, and she saw to it, and with Dr. Sen Gupta, they both saw to it that the session went seamlessly. And your presence has really been insightful for all the participants. Today's webinar aimed to explore the evolving dynamics of India's public finance system with a special focus on enhancing state capacity and role of fiscal federalism and the growing scope for chartered accountants and professionals in public sector. Shamika, madam, I will be personally happy if we can meet you in Delhi also sometime and take this topic forward and how the chartered accountants can get involved. In fact, today's meeting with GASAB, that is Government Accounting Standard Advisory Board, also in the line with our efforts that chartered accountants should participate in the government initiatives and how we can contribute in that. Professional opportunities definitely are there with that regard, but basic participation and understanding the entire dynamics of the national or you can say economics and economical activities. So definitely we'll be in touch with you, madam. Thank you very much for being here in this program. Thank you, Nupurji. Thank you, Sen Gupta ji, and of course the staff who has been sitting here, led by Seema madam. And thank you all participants for being actively participating in this. We will definitely organize much more programs. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Shamika madam, I would be taking your appointments to Nupurji once again.
Yes.
Yeah, please. Thank you, madam. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, madam. Yeah. Thank you. ठीक है?
Yes, and